The motive for the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. In this video we're going to take a look at a section of the recently released documentary, The Essex Boys, Blood and Betrayal, and I'm going to share some of my thoughts regarding a section of this documentary that I simply believe to be untrue. Take a listen to the following.
In 1998, Darren Nicholls stood trial at the Old Bailey, and during that trial he gave a detailed and clear account as to why Tate, Tucker and Rolfe were murdered by Mickey Steele and Jack Williams.
I only learned of the identity of two of the victims from the news. Mickey told me sometime after the murders that the men had been tempted to the scene by a story of a cocaine deal and that the cocaine was to be imported by plane. Mickey also told me that the gun had been ground up and thrown into the sea. He said that Pat Tate had borrowed money from two brothers to buy the drugs and hadn't repaid it. He said Tate had told the brothers that Mickey had not repaid him, and of course, Mickey heard this, and that Mr. Tate had planned to deliver him to the brothers and to shoot him in front of them.
Okay, so you heard there at the start of that piece, Darren Nicholls gave a detailed and clear account as to why Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were killed by Steele. Nicholls then goes on to talk about the brothers. But yet it conveniently glosses over, or actually doesn't even mention at all, the fact that when Nicholls was initially arrested, he didn't have a clue what the motive for the murders was. Worse still, when Darren Nicholls was arrested, he put forward two fictional brothers, as in the Mullock brothers, as being the motive for the murders. Not the Blundell brothers. Not the Blundalls. Now some people are going to say, oh, hang on a minute. Darren Nicholls was protecting himself. That is an absolute load of rubbish. Let me explain to you why. When Darren Nicholls is initially arrested, it's imperative that at least that part of his story is factual. It needs to be factual, the motive for the murders. Why does it matter to Darren Nicholls what the motive for Mick Steele killing Tucker, Tate and Rolfe was? Why would it matter to him? It wouldn't. If he was that desperate to hide the Blundell's involvement or the fact that Tate owed the Blundell's money, why not simply say, Steele owed money to some brothers? I don't really know who they are, but apparently I'd heard whispers that Steele owed some money to some brothers. Why did he use the name Mullock? I'll tell you why. Because in early 1996, Michael Steele started to receive some very strange telephone calls.
Yeah, I haven't got a clue about it. I've made inquiries and I find it ironic that other people have given him the same amount of money. And I wonder what's happened to it. Perhaps I've got it under my floorboards, eh?
Well, there's the thing.
Eh?
There's the thing, have you?
Well, I haven't got floorboards for a start. I've got concrete floor. And I wished I did have that sort of money about me, because I'd be a very happy man. Now then, what I want to say to you is the fact that you keep ringing up here, every fortnight or so. Billy was it on the phone just now? Making all sorts of threats. You know, like I said, I'm one of these people. I'm a little bit laid back. Nothing really worries me. And Billy was saying to me, like he's got A-levels in, he said A-levels in whacking people, I think his expression was. I honestly don't give...
Very strange telephone calls saying, we're these Irish gangsters, or we're based in Ireland and Tate owes us money. You've got his money, we want our money back, Mickey, or you're going to get seriously hurt. They started threatening Michael Steele and also Sarah Saunders over the phone. Now, Michael Steele, to the best of my knowledge, knew straight away that there was something a little bit strange about these phone calls. And it turned out that these phone calls were the police. The police were calling Michael Steele, pretending to be these Irish gangsters who were coming over to seek revenge because of the money that Tate had borrowed from them and they believed Mickey Steele was now in possession of. And this was a very, very controversial operation. It's called Operation Century. Take a look at it online. I've also done previous videos on this. And the name of those two brothers was Billy and John Mullock. So not only do we have Darren Nicholls being arrested and saying, yeah, I know why Tucker Tate and Rolfe were killed. It was the Mullock brothers. The Mullock brothers. Tate owed the Mullock brothers money, and they started putting pressure on Steele to recover the money. And that's why he had to kill Tate. That's why he had to kill all three of them. Ask yourself that question. Why did Darren Nicholls have absolutely no idea about the motive behind these murders? And what's even more funny is that Darren Nicholls put forward this motive in terms of the Mullock brothers, Billy and John Mullock. The Mullock brothers only come into existence after the murders took place. The phone calls to Steele start after the murders, and then Darren Nicholls is sitting there in the police station saying, yeah, it's the Mullock brothers. This is the reason Tucker Tate and Rolfe were killed, because of the money that was owed to the Mullock brothers. Now, you can bet your bottom dollar that people are now going to start posting online and saying, oh, Darren Nicholls didn't want to mention the Blundalls. Why would he mention the Blundalls? He's not going to bring the Blundalls into it. If that was the case, and Darren Nicholls genuinely knew about the Blundalls' involvement with lending Tate money, why wouldn't he just give a completely fictitious surname? Why wouldn't he say, oh, I thought it was the Smith brothers or something, I don't know. Or I don't even know the surname of the brothers, I've got no idea who they are, but that's what Mick's been talking about. It's clear what's happened here. Steele's been talking to Darren Nicholls at some point, and he's obviously slipped into the conversation. Oh, yeah, I keep getting these bloody phone calls. I don't know who they are. Some guys from bloody Ireland or something saying that Tate owes him money, and now I've got the money, and they're gonna hurt me. They're gonna hurt Sarah. Oh, who are they? What's their names? Oh, Billy and John Mullock or something. And then Nicholls has run with this, and when he's arrested, he said, yeah, I know the reason why they were killed. It was the Mullock brothers. The Mullock brothers, they owed money. They owed money to the Mullock brothers, and then still had to kill Tate. That's the reason for the murders. Think about this logically for one moment. Tune in and just think about this bloody logically. Why would Darren Nicholls lie about the motive for Steele killing Tucker Tate and Rolfe? Why would he lie about it? It's important that that part of his story is actually the truth, because he's got to go to court and he's got to back up all these allegations. And it's funny, isn't it, that his story completely changes from the Mullock brothers to just two brothers. In the documentary, it mentions Darren Nicholls said that two brothers were owed money. It fails to mention, though, doesn't it, in this documentary, that these two brothers were actually Billy and John Mullock. Not the Blundalls, Billy and John Mullock. So quickly, before we get into those passages and those transcripts regarding the police interview, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a clip for you regarding these transcripts that I created 2 years ago. So this isn't brand new, mind-blowing information. So ask yourself, why is this detail not covered in a documentary? Why is it portrayed that Darren Nicholls knew what the motive was, he knew about the brothers, he knew that Steele was being threatened, this, that and the other? And ask yourself why Darren Nicholls' statement completely changes. Where did Darren Nicholls himself get the information regarding the true motive? Because when he's arrested, Darren Nicholls doesn't have a bloody clue. Put it that way. What I'm going to do for you now is play a short clip of Jack Wombs and Michael Steele's police interview, which I've narrated for you. And this discusses the Mullock brothers in detail. So you can say whatever you like, but the proof is in the pudding, as they say. The proof is in the transcripts of those interviews conducted with Michael Steele and Jack Wombs, because these police officers genuinely believe that the motive for the murders is Billy and John Mullock, not the Blundell brothers. How embarrassing is this? The police actually investigate their own force. I mean, it's laughable, isn't it, really? You've got two investigating officers interviewing Michael Steele and Jack Wombs about these triple murders, and they believe that the two brothers are the motive for these murders, yet these two brothers are undercover officers. They don't even realise it. It's an absolute shambles. So to sit there and say Darren Nicholls is the all-seeing, all-knowing oracle is a complete and utter joke. In these documentaries, why don't they just tell the truth? It's a little bit weird. Just tell the truth. Every single documentary has got bits added in and bits taken out. Focus on the facts. It's really not that difficult. Let's play this clip for you, As I say, it's the interview or a section of the interview conducted with Michael Steele and Jack Holmes. These were the very earliest interviews, as far as I'm aware, conducted with these two individuals, and listen to the motive put forward by Darren Nicholls. And interestingly, as I've just said, Nicholls changes his story. By the time we get to the Old Bailey, oh yeah, it's because Pat owed brothers money. He doesn't mention who they are, though. He doesn't mention it. He doesn't mention the Blundells. He doesn't mention the fictitious Mullock brothers who are undercover agents. He doesn't mention anyone. It goes from the Mullock brothers to, oh yeah, they owed the brothers money. And now it's tried to be portrayed in this documentary that Darren Nicholls meant the Blundells. No. Not having that. He meant the Mullock brothers. Take a listen to the following. Now, in the interest of giving you all of the factual information concerning this point, we need to go back to Darren Nicholls' official statement under oath again, where I'm going to read a very small section out so that you are aware of Darren Nicholls' final version of events and the motive for these murders. Remember that this statement was made in October 1996, and it's in this statement that Darren Nicholls states the following. There was conversation as to why it happened with Mick. Roughly, it was when the money had been returned from the bad drug deal. A lot of the money Pat had put into it wasn't his. He had borrowed it, and what Pat decided to do was not repay those people. He would then blame Mick and say he hadn't paid them back. Mick knew this because Sarah had told him, Pat's ex-girlfriend. Pat was telling them he hadn't been paid back, and if he wasn't paid back, he would kill Mick. And it's important that you understand exactly how this process went with Darren Nicholls' early police statements, what he claimed very early on before his statements then morphed and changed into what they eventually became in October 1996 with that official statement under oath. The first part I'm going to read out to you comes from Michael Steele's police interview on the 17th of May 1996, conducted by DC Shakespeare. It's during this interview that Michael Steele is quizzed about the motive for these murders. The investigating officer states the following. Do you know anybody by the name Mr. Steele of Mullock? Mr. Steele, I believe it's spelt Mullock, M-U-L-L-O-C-K. Anything you can tell me about that name? Anybody that you may know by that name? Because it is alleged by Darren Nicholls that you told him that Pat Tate, one of the men who was subsequently murdered, borrowed the sum of £40,000 from the Mullock brothers in relation to the bad cannabis importation. And that money was obviously owed back to the Mullock brothers. They were obviously going to be looking for their money. Does that name mean anything to you? Do those circumstances mean anything to you that I've outlined? It transpires, I understand, from Darren Nicholls that about 1/3 of the poor cannabis that you brought into the country, we say, was sellable, i.e. was of sufficient quality, that you were able to make some money on it. And that Patrick Tate, he says, took those drugs up north somewhere in this country and presumably did with that what he wanted. Well, I wouldn't imagine you'd be very happy about that, would you, Mr. Steele? Would you like to tell me about the relationship that Sarah Saunders has with your common law wife, Jackie Street? Are they friends? Have you ever at any stage, Mr. Steele, paid any monies to Sarah Saunders in relation to property to maintain her lifestyle? On the 8th of the 11th, 95, the day that you bought the bad cannabis importation into the UK, Pat Tate, as my colleagues outlined to you, was arrested on a drink driving charge in Southend whilst he was driving a Porsche belonging to Tony Tucker. That was, of course, the same day, as I've said, that you were stopped on the beach. Were you aware that Pat Tate had in fact been arrested on that same day? Was there ever an occasion, Mr. Steele, when yourself, Patrick Tate, and perhaps Darren Nicholls, Sarah Saunders were together at a house to mend a cooker? Does that ring any bells to you at all? Darren Nicholls has told us that. Now, moving on then to the questions with regard to the events that we say happened last year. We mentioned the name of the Mullock brothers, the spelling of which I gave you. If it's incorrect, then I apologise, but certainly a name of that ilk. And I asked you whether you knew anybody of that name, and you obviously maintained your right to silence. Having now had an opportunity to think about it, is there anything that you would like to say about your knowledge of those persons by that name or any dealings that you've ever had in the past? Is it true, Mr. Steele, that you've known Pat Tate for a number of years and that Pat Tate at one stage, for whatever reason, was perhaps getting a little bit too big for his boots within your fraternity, your circles, perhaps getting a little bit above himself? Was that perhaps true? You see, Darren Nicholls has told us that Pat Tate told the Mullock brothers, bearing in mind that the Mullock brothers are still owed quite a substantial quantity of money from your bad cannabis importation. It is alleged that Pat Tate said to the Mullock brothers at one stage that he would put you, Mr. Steele, on your knees before them. That's what Pat Tate said, wasn't it? Have you ever heard from anyone that such a conversation occurred between Pat Tate and the Mullock brothers? Because certainly, if I had heard of that, I wouldn't be very happy that somebody had said that. As I'm sure perhaps you weren't very happy, if that's what you heard. Sarah Saunders is a name that we've mentioned. As we already know, Sarah Saunders was the ex-girlfriend of Patrick Tate. I've asked you questions about your relationship with her, which you've chosen to stay silent about. I've asked you, was there ever an occasion when Sarah Saunders had repeated to you that conversation had taken place with the Mullock brothers? Because Darren Nicholls is telling us that Sarah Saunders certainly did relay that conversation to you. We now take a break from that interview and take a look at Jack Wome's interview from the 16th of May 1996, where the Mullock brothers make yet another appearance. The interviewing officer during this interview is DC Myhill, and he states the following. Have you ever heard of the Mullock brothers? Ever heard of them, Jack? Because Mr. Tate, Patrick Tate, the deceased I should say, is believed to have been in debt to them for £40,000 because of this bad cannabis deal, and he was getting a bit of pressure put on him. And Patrick Tate didn't want to give them their £40,000 back because Mr. Tate, Patrick Tate, I think believed he had become, shall we say, for want of a better word, one of the big drug dealers in this part of Essex. We believe that Patrick Tate, not only was he not giving the Mullocks their money back, but he was saying I haven't got my money back from Mickey Steele. Do you understand that? So again, there was some bad feeling coming from other people as regards to Mr. Steele. And obviously, as far as we're concerned, you. Because you're connected with Mickey. So what's Mickey going to do about it? He's getting an awful lot of pressure now. He's saying to Pat that he's got the chance of a big job lined up, ripping somebody off. Have you heard of that before, Jack? Did Mick tell you about that? Allegedly, it was to do with 30 kilos of cocaine. And Mickey was going to bring that in by plane. Did you know anything about that deal? Being Mick's right-hand man, I suggested that he'd confide that in you. And the idea that Tate and Tucker would rob this firm of the cocaine, meaning the people that were financing the deal for Mick to go out and bring the stuff in when it landed, Tate and Tucker were going to have it for themselves, because they were big league now. Somewhere along the lines, this all gets rather clouded. People are, well, Mickey's getting rather concerned as to quite whether he can trust Tate and Tucker. Did he tell you that at all? Did Mick say that he was getting a bit concerned about Pat Tate and Tucker? Now, you're not going to believe this when I tell you who the Mullock brothers are. When I'd seen this before in the statements, I thought, they've changed the name here somewhere, They're doing this on purpose so that the real identity of the investors is hidden, hidden from the public or whatever. That was my opinion anyway. But something in my mind kept telling me, the Mullock brothers, there's something in this, there's definitely something in this. And I've seen something about this before. So I went back and I looked at the Operation Century blog, which was written by Ian Cameron. And it mentioned there that Darren Nicholls made this huge blunder during questioning as he put forward the motive for the murders as to be connected with the Mullock brothers, the Irish cops. And I thought, I have seen that somewhere before in these statements. So I spent the best part of the day going through these statements, trying to find out who the Mullock brothers are. And lo and behold, I have found it. And here it is. The trial points from the defence, page 3, where the defence has written down here, we clearly know that Nicholls' motive for murder was a £40,000 loan to Tate from the infamous Mullock brothers, and this is a total fabrication, his finest example of fact into fiction to date. The Mullocks, of course, are bungling undercover Irish-speaking cops, Mullock cops. We have to assume, of course, that the Mullock cops have not loaned Tate £40,000 to purchase drugs with. Now, to give you an idea who these people are, do you remember the undercover operation, Operation Century, against Michael Steele and Sarah Saunders, which commenced, I believe, at least with Michael Steele, on Thursday the 15th of February 1996? Well, this is Billy and John, Billy and John Mullock. These are the Irish cops. Nicholls has come forward when he's arrested to say that the motive for the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe are the undercover police officers. Now we know that this cannot be true in any way, shape or form, because Operation Sentry, the first phone call to Michael Steele, doesn't originate until Thursday the 15th of February 1996.
I haven't got a clue about it. I've made inquiries and I find it ironic that other people have given him the same amount of money. Now then, I wonder what's happened to it. Perhaps I've got it under my floorboards, eh?
Well, there's the thing.
Eh?
There's the thing, have you?
Well, I haven't got floorboards for a start. I've got concrete floor. And I wished I did have that sort of money about me, because I'd be a very happy man. Now then, what I want to say to you is the fact that you keep ringing up here, every fortnight or so. Billy was it on the phone just now? Making all sorts of threats. Like I said, I'm one of these people. I'm a little bit laid back. Nothing really worries me. And Billy was saying to me like he's got A-levels in, he said A-levels in whacking people, I think his expression was. I honestly don't give.
So Nicholls is arrested, he's being interviewed, and he said that Steele has told him that the motive for the murders was Billy and John, the Irish cops. But the Irish cops didn't appear until after the murders. So how could that be the motive for the murder? Nicholls has made a ginormous blunder here. It's absolutely ludicrous that Darren Nicholls has the ability to then come back in October 1996, months after these statements are given, months after the interviews with Michael Steele and Jack Holmes have commenced, months after the interrogation to Darren Nicholls has gone through in a thorough manner. It's ludicrous that he is able to change his story from two fictional characters, Billy and John Mullock, who are undercover police officers, to Sarah Saunders told Steele that his life was in danger because he hadn't paid back the money. That's literally what he's done in his official statement. Let me just bring up the official statement once more, just to read that small section at the bottom. There was conversation as why it happened with Mick. Roughly, it was that when the money had been returned from the bad drug deal, a lot of the money that Pat had put into it wasn't actually his. He had borrowed it. And what Pat decided to do was not pay those people back and blame Mick to say he hadn't been paid. Mick knew this because Sarah had told him, Pat's ex-girlfriend. Pat was telling them he hadn't been paid back, and if he wasn't paid back, he would kill Mick. This is his official version of events. It's gone from initial arrest of two officers who were involved in an undercover operation against Steele being the motive for the murders. Can you believe that? The undercover operation against Steele, according to Darren Nicholls, was the motive for the murder. The investigating officers investigating Steele after the murders were committed were the motive for the murders. That's how insane this story really is.